So when did you know that you could take your sport to the highest level? When?
Yeah, I don't think in those days it really worked a lot like that, because I suppose the infrastructure that was put together in the early days wasn't as perfect as it is in this day and age, where everything's mapped out quite well for young athletes. But in my day, I suppose you just went one level and then achieved there, made the next level state, and then achieved there, and then made it to Australia. And then I think it's one day you wake up and you think, oh, I'm actually quite okay at this. So I think it's that day and that realization for anyone who does anything. That's when it becomes where it becomes in your blood, basically. Yeah.
I've spoken to quite a few people now who've achieved at that level. And a common theme that I've found, Joyce, is that people kind of, when they get that moment, it's a beautiful, exhilarating moment. But at the same time, their modesty, because we're kind of Australians, go, like, you know, don't think that. Like, you know, you're not that good. Like, they get these little, I suppose, voices in their heads kind of telling them that they really shouldn't be thinking that, and they feel guilt for feeling that. Did you ever feel that kind of sensation?
I think you go through stages when you're playing or doing something that you become, you know, sort of in that top level. And I think what really happens is you at first go, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. You know, I never thought in my wildest dreams this would happen. But then I actually think you get an arrogance about you. And I think there is a timeline of arrogance where your expectation, especially in a team sport, is that everyone else should be the same and putting in the same amount of effort. And, you know, there's that arrogant expectation. And I definitely went through that. And anyone who knows me would think that they've seen that side of me. And then I think you realise that competitiveness in a social area is not a great aspect or not a great personality trait to have. So you tend to reel it all in, and realise that probably you were not a nice person during that time. But I do understand what you're saying, that, look, I suppose there's a quiet confidence, but I do believe that even though someone's modest on the outside, on the inside, they're very confident about what they can do and what they can't do. Yeah, definitely.
Really cool and complicated at the same time. So you've got, let's break that down. So on one level of personal development, you're achieving amazing things. Like, you're representing your country, you're the best at that. So, if, you know, in your particular case, you're the best catcher, you're the best softball catcher in Australia, and was consistently for a while. But at the same time, that knowledge was undermining a part that was developing a part of your character. It appears to me that you kind of didn't like that, and other people and you've indicated that perhaps other people stated that they didn't like. Can we dive into that a bit?
Oh, look, I think there are expectations, and I suppose when you were in an individual sport, you have no one but yourself. But in a team sport, it's very different. So you're having to play with people who are better than you, or people who don't play up to standard, or, you know what I mean? So I think in everyone who plays in a team sport, you have that expectation. And if you don't have that expectation, no one's ever going to live up to it either. But I think, you know, people have said to me, oh, when you were younger, you said this to me. And I went, oh God, did I? That's such a horrible thing for me to have said. Whereas I would never say that now, but it's a stage you go through. And I think I spoke to a sports psychologist about it, because I see it happening in other players who are very good, and they become a little bit uncoachable during a certain period of the time in their career. Wow. At that high level. And it is an arrogance, and it's an expectation, especially in team sports, for people to put in the same amount of effort, or, you know, to lift their game. Yeah, unfortunately, but it is true.
You know, there would be that pressure on yourself that you don't want to let the team down, and there's going to be pressure from other people. It's like, you're kind of destroying my dream here. You are letting me down. That's a lot of pressure. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, I'd probably go for someone who was dependable and who could put in, because you never know what's going to happen on a day. on the day. So you need people who are never going to give in, because giving in is the worst possible part of a team sport, and non-belief.
Well, that raises something else, and it's ironic because I was actually discussing this with my son, who plays in a five-a-side fun soccer team, and he was lamenting the fact that there weren't enough rep players in his side, and they've got one actually, and another player who isn't at the rep level but is really good. He goes, "Oh, we can never beat these other teams. On paper, they're better than us." And I'm paraphrasing what he said, and I said, "You guys have beaten." Because their little team has beaten some of the rep sides at some time. So on paper, those guys are better than you, and yet you've beaten them. And why? It's because you're consistent. You know, you turn up, you're turning up to training, you're doing your best, you're not letting the circumstances defeat you mentally, keeping your tails up when there's a goal against you. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be kind of consistent, reliable, competent and capable. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Oh, look, absolutely. The first women's Queensland team I made, nearly all of the women were all under 21, and there was only a couple over the age of 21. So we played in the Open Queensland team, and it was a 2-week tournament in those days, and we won it. And against teams that were full of Australian players, and we were nobodies, but just young kids who loved the game to death, who all trained really hard together, and there was a lot of talent in there, but it was the beginning talent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And we all just came together as a team, and most of those players ended up playing for quite a long period of time and staying in the game for a long period of time.
What an empowering message. You got to love it. So if you're passionate about your sport, you truly love it. Bottom of your jam tart. You're consistent. You apply yourself. You don't have to always be the best on paper, and you're still a really good chance of winning and being in part of a team that is going to take it to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. You can beat anyone on day. Yeah.
I suppose you'd call it a mental and character hurdle. Are there any other hurdles that you overcame to get from passionate lover of the sport to national level? Okay, so, well, tell us about being selected for the Olympics.
Well, I suppose I was 38 at the time, and so that was, I think, the 20th year that I played for Australia. So I was at the stage where I was retiring. So actually, I didn't have children, and that's so I could spend my life doing what I really love doing. Whereas I think a lot of people who end up getting married and having children, are a little bit more limited. So I think when they decided Australia that softball would go in the Olympics, there was just no way I was retiring for that. Obviously, I'm one of the best softball teams in the world. So of course they wanted a chance for another gold medal. So they included softball in. So that for me was amazing. And look, if anyone ever gets a chance to even go to a city to where an Olympic Games is being held, it's the best and amazing experience in your lifetime. It's like a big party city, but when you're competing, it's not a party, but the vibe is amazing. People are so open to saying hi. It becomes such a great experience. And the Sydney Olympics was just outstanding. I don't know whether you went, but I went there, and just walking around Sydney was outstanding, and then you'd have Paul Kelly, free concerts, 1,000 people in the park. And anyway, it was just vibrant. It's become such a vibrant time, and that whole feeling oozes through you and the team. And actually, it can be quite a great hype for you, or it can be a great pressure, depending on how you see it.
It'd have to be close to being like a life-defining thing, like walking out there, hundreds of thousands of people looking at you. That was a big year, actually, 1996. It was the 100th anniversary of the revival of the modern games. All the former communist countries competed under their own flag. Could you walk us through some of the games that you played and any highlights for you?
There were 8 teams in the competition. Of course, they're the best in the world. And I think for us, I actually believe that we could have won it that year. We had 5 pitchers in our team, 5 extraordinary pitchers. We had some really great individual players who had played overseas before, and I think we were very, very competitive. What happened to us though was we went on the opening ceremony, and not what most people probably don't realise is that opening ceremony, you sit in those stands waiting for hours and hours. All of the athletes are there waiting in this huge stadium, which is usually beside that stadium, and you spend hours there, and then you walk out, do one loop, which is absolutely outstanding, and then you stand in the middle of the stadium for the next couple of hours. And I want you to think of the logistics of getting all the people in the stands out, all of the athletes out, all the performers out. So it actually ends up being like a 12-hour nightmare, other than that moment of walking out, which is absolutely outstanding. And we actually ended up playing the next day, and it was a big mistake. We should never have walked out onto the stadium. I think that was the worst game of our tournament we played, the opening game against China, and I think we lost horrendously. Yeah, and in retrospect, I think all of the athletes in the team said we shouldn't have gone to the opening ceremony, but being first timers at Olympics, we're all like, yeah, we have to go, we have to go. That's the most exciting part. And then you do it and you go, yeah, wow, that just draws your whole day out. No training, no nothing, on buses. And plus, we were staying in Fort Lauderdale, which was probably a couple of hours outside Atlanta. So the whole softball fraternity, also then you had to hop on a 2-hour bus trip to get back. Anyway, so it was a logistical nightmare. Our first game was horrendous. And then we ended up losing to Puerto Rico, who had the 8th standing in the team. So we thought we were done and dusted quite early in the piece. So after all that training and everything, everyone was just so devastated. Look, I shouldn't say this, but even our head coach was so upset. I think, quite a few players were crying, after we lost against Puerto Rico, because we knew we just had to win every single game from that time on. And we still had US to play, and our history against US wasn't great. But guess what? We beat the US. The best way to beat the US is to take them to a tiebreaker. They're such a formidable team and such strong, but they play so much more softball than we do here. We don't have a college system that promotes women like they do in America and like they do in Japan and like they do in other countries. Here, our support system of women playing sport is terrible, really. And I know there's a whole lot of great things going on in women's sport. They're actually men's sports that are actually promoted by men. They're not actual sports that are women's sports, if you know what I'm saying. And I think it's another way for men to promote their own sport by being inclusive and including women. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's fantastic. But in the end, what will happen is those sports, your cricket, your AFL, your rugby league, and soccer that now getting women getting some money, I think sports like ours will end up dying because there's no support system there. And it'd be great if we had like a college system or a system in Japan where you leave high school and you get an opportunity to play professional sport. In all sports, all women get that chance. All men get that chance. It's an amazing system. And so you can play sport. You can go to university and play sport for your university in Japan. So it's really quite outstanding. And we have nothing, just really clubs and schools, and hopefully the people with the most money can get into schools and promote their own sport. Yeah.
You're exactly right. That is, and I was having a conversation precisely along this line with a friend of mine over beers about women's sports. And I said, you got to understand, these aren't women's sports. So they're male sports that that females play. I didn't actually mention, softball. I said, but there are specific women's sports and they're going to hurt as a direct result of this. You're spot on.
Yeah.
And that is a real concern. And part of it's all this kind of weird thing that's going on about this idea of, and I don't want to go too much into that, but yeah, that is a sport that women do. That's a sport specifically for women. And I'd love to see more of that, because me personally, it means that you can see women shine as a sex, and also it means that you can see individual females shine inside of a sport.
Yeah.
You can't get that when you have too much of this mixed sport. You actually don't see women shine. You know, I couldn't agree more with you on that.
Actually, comparing you to the men. So I know in AFL and the women are doing great and they're really improving, but everyone says to me, oh, you watch the women, you know, it's really not so good. But it's got to be a different game anyway, as it is in softball. So men have played softball, but women probably are more dominant in the ownership of the game because they originally played it and then men came in after. And I think that whole realization that women will get taken over by men's sports, and it's happening at the moment. And look, you can't blame the men's sports for doing it, but I just wish people would realize what is really happening. And, you know, you've got your hockey, and hockey's a great sport, and it's the same sort of thing really, where when someone gets a choice of playing hockey for nothing and having to pay to play their sport. So the whole time I played for my own country, I paid my own way. So I didn't actually buy a house till I was 39 years old, because I spent all my money playing sport and traveling the world to play sport. And it wasn't until I actually went to Japan and played professional ball that I actually got paid for the first time ever for playing. Yeah. So it's sad that we don't do that in our own country.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the conversation I was having was actually around netball, and I like watching netball. It's a female sport. My daughter plays it. She's quite accomplished. My wife's pretty good at it too. Actually, she was pretty good back in the day. And the conversation that went around this, I said, once a men's league of netball starts, and it's going to happen, like it's going to eclipse the female league. It just will, because men are like that. It's just biology.
You can't beat testosterone.
You just can't. You just can't. And again, the whole thing is because there is biological reality. And like even me saying that now is a contentious thing, but it's, you know, you're kind of delusional if you don't realize that biology is an objective reality. And it's unfair on women to have these sports taken over. They get marginalized. It's just not right. And they can't shine. They got no outlet for, you know, the competitiveness, the physicality, the having fun, the camaraderie, all the other positive things about sport.
Look, I actually think women will always play a different game no matter what sport they play. So often men's softball, they play very much a different game to what the women play, because they're so much stronger. You know, they can throw the ball harder and faster, whereas the women have to play smarter, really. They have to have more skills to be able to be to do well within the sport. And so I think that's the difference. So I remember when I was younger and I used to watch a lot of women's tennis, I actually used to enjoy it a lot more than the men, because there were less aces and there was more rallies, and it was, you know, actually more enjoyable to watch. So I think in some ways, I think AFL is played differently. I know a few girls who play AFL, they can't kick as far, they can't, you know, do the same sort of, can't run as fast, but they still have to play differently and smarter, I think. So people shouldn't ever compare it. They should just realize it's actually a totally different game, and that's how they should see it, and realize that there's a whole different way of playing the game when you don't have that extra power.
What an interesting conversation. I didn't expect this topic to come up. So thanks for your insights on that. If I can drag you back to the Olympics, you've kind of articulated a slight degree of disappointment, but your team won a medal.
Oh, no. It was a roller coaster ride. We looked like we weren't going to get anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that we crawled our way back, beat the US. Look, we only beat the Netherlands 1-0, you know, and it was very scary because we had a bit of a break in our hitting, I think, because you know, once things aren't working out for you, you tend to tense up. It's really hard to relax, and when you're winning, it's easy, you know, that whole mental part of the game. But we struggled through, and we got to the medal games and Japan in the medals, whereas now Japan are a whole different team to what they were in those days. So now they have just they have a pitcher, Wayno, who throws 116 k's an hour. So a normal pitch, she might throw 109 if she's throwing movement, but then if she's throwing her fast pitch. And then she has she has 3 speeds, you know, fast, really fast, straight pitch. And then she has her movement pitch, which is probably 109.10. And then she has her slow pitch, and her slow pitch is about the same speed as an up-and-coming pitcher in Australia. So, you know, a difficult game. But when you think, when I played, the pitcher was 3 feet closer. So they actually tried to change the game and get more hitting in the game and try and get it so the pitcher wasn't as prominent. And so there'd be more action. So they moved the pitching plate back. So that changed the game somewhat as well. And they did that before Athens Olympics.
And again, you won a medal. Come on, you got to show us. You've got to show us the medal.
I only have it here because you asked me to have it here.
Damn right. And look, I'm gonna butt out. I'm gonna butt in and say that is so cool. Come on, right up to the camera.
It looks gold, but it's bronze. But you know, most people when you go, they go, "Oh, is that gold?" And I go, "I wish." No, but it's very beautiful, engraved, wooden engraved, gorgeous. I actually think the box is gorgeous as well. So yeah. Very an amazing thing to have. I only have to watch the Olympics and watch someone standing on the podium, and I cry watching it on as a spectator. So, I mean, I don't think I cried at the time that happened. It was outstanding when they hand you all the flowers and then they put the medal around your neck. I think that's just an outstanding experience, and I think there's, you know, it's something you dream of doing, and people always say if you finally get there, it was a dream, and then you finally get there and go, oh my God, you know, nothing surpasses that. Unfortunately for me, though, I only had one chance to go because my retiring year was the year that was our first year at the Olympics. We had a World Cup, and that happened every 4 years. So yeah, I went to 5 World Cups that won Olympics. So that was, for me, yeah, so lucky just to get that one in.
Talk us through the World Cups.
This is how I often think that the young players must think. So I remember the first year we went to San Salvador and played there, and it was just before their revolution that started in '78. And so we went there, and there were machine gun guys everywhere, and it was the army. We were in army buses all the time. You weren't allowed to go anywhere by yourself. You had a guy with a machine gun out front your hotel door. It was quite weird. I was 18 years of age, just 18. So I thought, oh my God, this is bizarre. But when I first got there and I saw the US team, like, they were giants, man. I just looked up and went, because I don't think, I'm not small in any case whatsoever. I'm quite tall, but these women were massive, and there was about 5 of them in the team that were over 6 foot and strong, you know, like they just had a presence as soon as you saw them. So as a young girl, I went, oh my God, you know. So first, and then I think of my first reaction and how I felt, and think, other people must do that when they first get in the team. And then you sort of go, oh, how am I going to hit that ball, you know? But I think our preparation in those days was so tiny compared to what happens in this day and age, that your preparation is hitting against people who already, you know, the speeds. You've got IT out being sent off to everyone. You've got the hitters, whereas in those days you went over there almost blind, you know, not seeing how they played or anything. You just turn up and go, oh. So just by stature alone, you were gobsmacked. And they were outstanding players. And in those days, US always won, and nobody came within cooey of them, really. So that was outstanding. But we'd arrived at the games in San Salvador, and there were tens and tens of thousands of people. The place used to get totally packed. It was outstanding. But when we'd go home, they had parked in. There were no rules for parking. There were no, you know, slots like you have in Australia, that people just parked anywhere. So we would have the first game, which would be, you know, like midday, and then you'd be finished at your game by 2, and then you go to get in the bus, and your bus wouldn't be able to get out because there were just cars everywhere. And that meant you'd have to stay and wait till the last game or till the cars cleared. But so what we decided to do is this is great teamwork here. We'd all get out and kangaroo jump all the cars across. kangaroo jump them, and so our bus could get out. I think all the army guys were going, oh, wow, these women are talented. But that was an experience in itself. I think, probably came 5th that year. So in the early days, we had very strong team, but that first year, I think we came 5th. And from that time on, we mostly had medalled through the World Champs. So it was San Salvador, Taiwan, New Zealand, Illinois, normally, and Newfoundland. Now, what a great place Newfoundland is. You know, like, you know what? What a great place. So it was in St. John's, which is the major city there, and it's so beautiful. And it's amazing because there's there's whales all the time, and then I imagine going there's icebergs floating, and that's what the locals do, go out and chip off bits of icebergs and keep them because it's the freshest water, they believe. Anyway, so that was such a beautiful place, and I think St. John's had 52 pubs. So at the end of our tournament, after we'd finished, boy, we had a great time. That last night. Yeah, so I think we came first that tournament, and that we qualified to go to the Olympics. Yeah. So
another follow-up question I'd really like to ask about what happens in those Olympic villages that we hear so much about, all the partying and whatnot. This
is where the partying thing comes in, because we played first 10 days, and then there's another long period, another 7 days or whatever. And so then you go into the Olympic village after you finish the tournament. So we'd already won our medal, and then you got taken to the Olympic village in amongst all these people who are still competing. So you're in party mode and they're in competitive mode, and everyone's meandered in together, which is sort of a bit wrong. Like, sort of what happened this year is once you compete, you should really go home. That's what I think. But most people who are going to listen to this are going to say that's very boring, Joyce, of you to say that, because I'm a bit of a party girl. So I love a party, but I think it's really wrong for the people who are competing. Because I actually remember coming home one time from being on a night out after we finished our competition, and Sandy Brondello, who was the captain of the Opals, they played every couple of days, so they had to play the whole time, and even in the closing ceremony, their game, they couldn't get to the closing ceremony because their game was then. So I was coming home from a big night out. She was waking up and having a shower, about to go and play and do a training session beforehand. And I'm, hi, Sandy, how you going? And she goes, I don't want to know where you've been. So she's off still in this mode, and it's sort of bizarre. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Very bizarre. But it's an interesting place. And the fact McDonald's are a big supportive sponsor, they have McDonald's there, and the eating area is nuts. It's like the biggest eating area I've ever seen in my whole life. Yeah, and you can get anything you want, basically. And
I'd imagine too, because there's all these like young, fit, single people mixed around together there. Like that would be good for, how would I put this politely, international relations. Was there a fair bit of diplomacy and international relations shipbuilding going on over there, like in your experience?
You mean sex?
That's what I was politely trying to say. Yes, you're.
Oh, look, I know.
I know you're a delicate lady, Joyce. I didn't want to offend you.
I'm not into and don't partake in any of that sort of stuff, but I know it went on because I had friends in other sports, and I won't mention what sports, but there's a lot of people who hang around, and it's not just the Olympians, it's the people who work at the Olympics as well. So I think anything almost goes.
We don't want to use phrases like shag fest, but it was a shag fest.
Look, not with the women that I know.
No.
To be absolutely honest, but it means once your tournament's over, you can do whatever you like. And so the fact that they still have all the athletes there after they finish competing, that's why that happens. A lot of people don't go there to do that. They're there to compete. Once you have that party thing happen where you've got people there who have finished competing, and when you look at some of the swimmers, often the swimming's the first week, and some of those guys finish their thing and then they've got nearly 2 weeks of nothing. But, you know, and then you go and watch and but you go and watch the other sports, and that's, look, there's a great story, and Laurie Lawrence was our team leader, mentory person, and so when we finished playing, I actually went and watched the men get their bronze in hockey, the women get their gold. You know, I went off and I watched the athletics. I didn't take off and party as such. I went and supported the rest of the Olympic team. And a lot of people do that because it's a great experience just to go and be a spectator. And they have sectioned off areas for athletes that they can go in and see, like they do for media. Anyway, we had just gone and watched the women win the gold medal, you know, and it was such a buzz, and everyone in the bus is going nuts, and Laurie Lawrence is going, how good was that? Yeah, you know, and everyone's screaming and yelling on the bus, Aussie, 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 oi, oi, oi. How great do we think about the hockey roos? Well, you know, it's the hockey roos, women. Oh, is that the men? What are the men? The kookaburras, and the women are the hockey roos.
That's it.
And so we're going nuts, and then he goes, yeah, and so everyone's hyped up in the bus, and then he goes, all right, who wants to go and watch the Australian basketball play the Boomers? No, the Boomers play the American team, sorry. And we all went, yeah. And then we all went, but none of us have tickets. None of us. Laurie Lawrence goes, who cares? Let's storm the place. So he gets the bus driver to go take the whole bus, 3 buses of Australians, to go to support the Australian Boomers. It's to when they were playing the American team, but none of us had bought a ticket. And so he says to us, okay, when you get off the bus, when there's security there, just show your thing and just keep walking. Even if they tell you to stop, just keep walking. There's no way they're going to be able to stop 3 bus loads of Australians getting in. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be interesting. Like, and with security and stuff that went on in Atlanta because of bombings and everything like that, you go, oh my God. But sure enough, we get off the bus, we all hurl together. He's out the front, just everyone's showing their, you know, their ticket to just basically that you're an Olympian and you're allowed access. And they're going, wait. He goes, no, keep moving. And sure enough, they found enough room for 3 bus loads. And then we watched them play, the Australians play the American team in basketball. So it was great. Easy enough. Laurie Lawrence is a nut, a good nut.
The closing ceremony, when they say, you know, it's coming next year is Sydney.
Yes, so when they did Gloria Estefan sang Reach.
Yes.
And I think the best part about that is we all went, oh my God, because she went, oh, I am so amazed to be in front of all of you. You know what I mean? Like, she made it sound like everyone around her was important. So it was sort of amazing. And then Stevie Wonder came out, and of course everyone was so excited. People started, oh my God, Stevie Wonder, oh my God. And obviously because he's blind, and a lot of the athletes got overexcited. Maybe some of them had too many drinks, started jumping the fence and going on to the oval where the entertainers were, where they were supposed to just be sitting and watching. So they actually ended up taking Stevie Wonder back because he was starting to get scared because of all this noise that was supposed to be coming near him, all the spectators were supposed to be a long way away from him. And yeah, so you can't really control a lot of people en masse. Yeah, I think the story is. And I think closing ceremony was just outstanding. Yeah, and then they play highlights of all the different sports on the big screen. And I think for us, they put Joe Brown's home run against the US and the whole team going nuts afterwards. So we were actually up there at the closing ceremony final thing. So we were super excited to see that. Yeah.
Let's go right back. What got you into softball?
I was in primary school at the time. My sister played, Lee, so she was a state team member for about 10 years as well. So we both were in the team together. And she started playing at school. So I started playing at school. And then she went to high school, and then a friend of hers played softball and said, why don't you come on the weekend? So my mum and dad took Lee to the game, and I went as well, and they were short one player. Say no more. I went on and played. And then from that time I played in that team. And so my cousins both used to play the whole way. So they were very good sports people and great netball players as well. So they both played. In fact, I was lucky enough to play with Alison because she came back after many years and came and played. And so I got to play alongside her. Yeah. So yeah, it was sort of like a family sporting thing that we all had.
Tell us about the role, besides just catching the balls. Tell us what a catcher does, and you know, the signals and all that kind of stuff. Can you talk me through that?
Look, being a catcher is just the best possible position to play, I think. So you are in control of the field. So your coach is sitting on the bench, and of course things in the game have somewhat changed, but in those days it was the catcher who basically ran the team when we were fielding. So you call the shots. So usually a pitcher can throw a drop ball, a straight ball, a rise ball, and a curve, and a change of speed. So you need to know your hitters beforehand, and you pick out of the pitches what you think is going to be the best pitch or the best combination of pitches to get your batter out, or to set up your field, because you know, for example, some hitter might always hit a high inside to left field, and she'll always hit a fly ball. So you just call that because you know she's going to hit it out to left field, and it's an easy out, you know, or you know she's going to hit two foul balls if you called it on the inside. So automatically you have two strikes, and so then you can play around with them and then try and get them out. So it's a great way to know your coaches and try and make sure that their signals aren't going to work. So you know that some coaches will always steal with 2 out and a runner on 1. So you know they're going to do it. So, or you know they're going to do a squeeze with a runner on 3 on a certain pitch. So a squeeze is where the batter must put the ball on the ground and bunt it, and the runner steals home. It's a very aggressive, amazing play. But as a catcher, if you know your coaches, you know, they often run into habitual types of behaviour. So you might know they nearly always do it on the first pitch, or they nearly always do it on the pitch after the first strike. So you know certain things. So then you call a pitch out, and the pitch out is where I'd catch the ball and give the signal to the pitcher, and she has to throw it right outside so the batter can't reach it. So she can't put the ball on the ground. The runner is sprinting home. So you know what I mean? It's a lot of like a game of chess in lots of ways. There's
it's
a lot
the strategy. So you're not just holding the mitt and catching the ball. You got to know your opponents, and not just not just the team strategy. You got to know what the coach is going to do, which I suppose is team strategy, but the individual players. And then you got to know the strengths and weaknesses of your own players. You're fundamentally coordinating the entire field.
Yeah, look, it's a great position to play, and I think there's it was great fun to play. And I suppose watching the whole game behind and seeing every intricate part of the game, and that's what catching is. Really, it's sort of like being in the television and watching all the strikes and balls go down. You know, then you get to see the real game and what's happening. The unfortunate part is, as a spectator, you can't see what the catcher's calling. So it'd be interesting on a television to sort of know that as well, but you don't.
Could you talk us through the difference between that and coaching and being in Japan? That must have been an amazing experience.
Well, I actually went and played for 4 years. So after I finished in Atlanta, Tanya Harding, who was an Australian pitcher as well, her and I both went over and played for a team called Mickey House, which were a children's clothing company. So the teams over there get sponsored. All the professional teams get sponsored by companies, and it's just amazing. So we went over there, played our first season over there. It was a really difficult thing to do, the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life, because you're totally out of your comfort zone. They don't think or play the game the same way we play it. We play very much by confidence and strength and belief, where they're very much driven, coach driven, very much so. And so very disciplined. So I spent 4 years over there, and I was tired by the time I went there, because I was 38 the first year I played there. And so I wished I probably had gone over when I was a younger girl. And I probably would have been able to put up with it better. But saying that, it was difficult, but we met so many great people. You learned that we were so totally not disciplined enough in Australia, that we don't work hard enough, because they're just absolute training freaks. And so we would go to the gym in the morning, and then we'd go catch a train. And I think our training would start at 3 in the afternoon, and often you'd train, well, they'd train for longer than us. They were quite generous to us, because they would work in the mornings and then train in the afternoons. But they would be there training till 9, 10 at night. Yeah, they're amazing work, and then train. So we used to, by the time we tacked on, and often we used to walk from the train station, because there was a lot of time to kill, you know. So, and then you'd go home. It was sort of like, I used to call it Groundhog Day. Every day was the same. And in fact, when you first went there, you went, oh my God, this is amazing. But it was the same training over and over and over again. It's the same thing. And I'd just be like, in the end, at least in Australia, you have variety and stuff. And I'm sure it's changing now, because the coaches have changed quite dramatically. They're amazing people.
Yeah.
And so they've developed into an amazing team that have won the gold medal at the Olympic Games. So they won in Beijing. Because I worked for Channel 7, I did the commentary, and I remember Andy Kay, who was the producer, said to me, oh God, America's going to win again. I went, I reckon they're not going to win this year. I reckon it'll be Japan. And sure enough, Japan beat them in the final. So I was very happy about that. It's all the US. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always good to see. Look, I love America and I love Americans. I'm not one of those people that kind of runs down that magnificent country. But having made that qualification, it is good to see someone else win sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they just have such a great setup there, and so does Japan. And I often think, how can another nation beat them when they have that infrastructure? You really need your whole team to be over there playing all the time and being within that system playing for years to be able to compete with them, because all of a sudden you're just, up against these people.
You think about what that says about the reservoir of talent here in Australia, that we don't have that infrastructure, and yet, you know, we're putting up these really good players, these people that are punching, to use the overused but accurate analogy, we're always punching above our weight when it comes to these sorts of things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think we've had some world-class players in our past. And look, the captain, Stacey Porter, just retired this year after this Olympics. And so she's an Indigenous girl, and she's basically done the same thing. She played for the Australian team for 20 years and captained it for 12 years. So her and I have had a similar thing, except she's played 3 times as many games as me, because it's this day and age, you play so many games, the opportunities to play overseas. So there's so much going on now. And look, she's like this amazing player who really could play anywhere in the world and, you know, be the best player in the team. She's, you know, just an outstanding athlete. Just
that good. A while, and there's a shield named after you. Can you tell us about that? I think that's super cool.
I think because of the longevity in the game. So when you play for your country for that many years, I think, look, down the track, I think Stacey Porter will end up having something named after her as well. I think that just, it's not something you expect, but that you are lucky enough to have. And that's the under-23 national tournament. So, I mean, you just, I mean, I suppose the one day I realised about it was when I was sitting at a workplace and they used to do the general knowledge thing every day in the thing, and it came up, and the question was, which is Australian softballer has an under-23 national tournament named after it? And I was in the room, and it was very funny. And I kept that. Because I thought, oh, there's a general knowledge thing. And I thought, that'll be something that only happens once in my life. And of course, there must have been someone in Cairns who knew me, because it was in the Cairns Post. It wasn't like in the Australian or something.
So we've gone over your interesting, varied, and pretty cool career. Can you give us the contextual background? So tell us about your, your family background, your upbringing, your career, your life now, or your life with your partner who's providing disruptive influence there before. Chris, I know you're going to watch this later, and I can do things to your interview. I can do things to your interview, Chris. I'm just saying, throwing that out there. Okay. So yeah, could you talk us through that?
I suppose we were quite a poor family when we were young, so we grew up in Housing Commission House, and luckily for me, I think softball was the thing that took me out of, same as my sister took us out of that life into this whole different amazing life, and that fact that we had strict parents, especially my dad, who was super strict, but of course loved the fact that we played sport. So mum and dad actually used to drive around Australia and watch Lee and I play for Queensland until my sister retired, and then she got married and had children, and then I kept playing. Yeah, but yeah, I think that sports gives you something that can never be. It's a great step outside to wherever you want to go, and sports people are just so regaled in this day and age. Like some sports people get paid more than politicians and stuff like that. When you think of that, it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, it's not funny. But I was lucky enough to get to that level, to basically go and work in private schools. I was a teacher at Clayfield College for quite a while, and I must give Clayfield College the biggest tick that I worked for Ed Queensland and used to get docked my pay when I'd go away and play for Australia or Queensland. If it was during school time, they'd give you 5 days leave a year, and that was it. So I got jack of that. So I thought, I'm going to go to the private, went to Clayfield College, and they chose to pay me in full because I was a woman representing their country and their state, and they were supporting women at a girls' school. So they supported me all the years I was there. You know, absolutely thankful to them. And then when I left and moved to Cairns, I went to Trinity Anglican School, and again, great support as well from them. So I moved from state schools, and I know now that they support their sports players, but in that day and age, seriously, it was hard work. You lost so much money. Not only did you pay your own way, you lost money when you went away from your work. They docked your pay for all those times. So whilst I'd say it would cost that many $1,000s to go away, you should add on the loss of pay as well. So I think people only just see you don't get paid, but they don't look at the fact that a lot of people actually are taking days off work, and their workplace don't support them, even when they play for their own countries. And that still happens today. And there should be more of that where people know about it.
Yeah, I spoke to Scooter, the Paralympian, and he's he's a legend, a dead set character. And he had nothing but praise for his employment as well, because same sort of thing. He goes, look, I'm away all of the time, and they still pay me. Like, really, considering they're a kind of family-run small business, he couldn't speak highly enough about them.
Some sports get paid inordinate amounts of money, and I think, oh, good luck to them, they're lucky. But I suppose it's really hard for me, and I know this is really bad. Someone will say to me, oh, you're going to watch the State of Origin. And as much as I love rugby league, I'm not going to pay to go to one of those games. I'm not going to give the men more money. So I actually think women need to stand up for themselves. I actually think women should support other women in their sport. And I think women should not be turning on the television to watch men's sport, because it's just giving them more money and women less, if you know what I'm saying. Turn on the women's sport, sure, but try not to do that. Yeah.
Watch the netball.
Yeah, watch whatever there is. I mean, there's NITV have softball on. South Australia actually televise their league that they play. And there needs to be more of that. We used to actually have a highlights package where we put in all our nationals, and quite a long time ago, and it was quite great. And I don't know why softball stopped doing that, because it was absolutely fantastic. But I think, you know, that's it. I think when you go to America, they love their baseball and they love their softball, because it's something that's part of their heritage. It's like cricket here, it's like AFL and rugby league. So those are the sports you think of when you think of Australia, where over there you think of gridiron, you think of baseball, and the women's for the softball, but same as in Japan. Baseball's their big sport, and softball's were very big over there as well. Of course, they're into their tennis and the golf and everything else, but I think that other countries have it right, and you can go and play or get paid to play sport. In our country, it doesn't happen that way.
And if you think, really, we've got an institute of sport, and yet we've still got these
and they're supportive in lots of ways. They give money to athletes and incentives to athletes, and are very supportive, as are for me, QAS were very supportive but they were very, I think, late in my career. So I only started, like I remember the first time, I think they gave us training money for X amount of time to try and help you, because you had to have a full-time job, you had to support, but they gave you some training money. And I remember going, oh, I've always wanted television, decent television, because you didn't have money to buy any of those things because you spend all your money on sport. So when you got this money, it seemed weird that you would buy something that you'd never known. Someone would say, you can't buy that. That's money they gave you for sport. And I went, no, it's not. It's all the money you haven't been able to spend on all those things you've always wanted.
Yeah.
And finally, there's a compensation for all that training money that you've already paid out yourself. It's I think a compensation. But anyway, people see it differently.
I think the only kind of way around this would be to take less money in the first place and have this individual sponsorship. So, you know, you can have your local, you could have, I don't know, whomever it is, the local successful furniture store, you know, financing the ladies' softball, or financing whatever it is, rather than having all the money ripped out of them and a bureaucrat going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, making the decisions. I'd love to see those decisions made locally by local people who just get behind a sport that they love and they're concerned about. I mean,
Kevin Mark contacted me and said, how about we get the Cairns and out of Cairns Australian reps in all sports together, have a dinner, all support each other, meet up with each other, and whatever money's raised, we put into something. And I think it's such a great idea. We haven't quite gotten to it yet, but the thought's there. And I contacted a couple of people in town, the baseballer, Brett Ronenberg, and Carmel Bukursky, the hockey player. So they're all, I think Brett has a silver medal at the gold at the Olympic Games in baseball. So there's a lot of people in town that have done a lot of stuff, but it's sort of like a hidden thing in Cairns. So we're thinking of trying to, you know, dig these people out and try and get them together and try and bring people to dinners and try and raise money. I think it's a really good concept, Kevin.
Absolutely, and it'd fly. And let me tell you, I'd get right behind that. One of the entire points of Northern Vibe is, and despite your excessive modesty and the excessive modesty of most of the other people, there really is these amazing people, this incredible hidden talent here in Cairns. Like, you know, you've got guys like Lee Holman driving cars. Like he's at a national level up on the tablelands. You know, you got Trace Hannah, who's like this amazing sportswoman. And I'm going to plug the interview. Watch that one, Joyce. You'd really, really like it. This, you know, telling the stories of how she came back from these terrible crashes and the self-doubt, and then the, you know, maybe I'm deluding myself about this. And like, you know, all of these things that were happening in her head and that were happening with her physically and happening in her personal life. And yet still she maintained this balance. And she's this girl from Babinda. And she's working. Right. She's incredible. Yeah. She is incredible. But so are all the other guests. And so is, you know, really, and so is, I hate to say this because, you know, I've just been sledging. So is guys like Chris, you know, so are guys, you know, so are like all these other, yeah, I know. We don't like saying it, but it's true. All these people. Yeah.
Look, I think, I don't know whether people know, but Chris is my partner, and he was on here a while ago. He's a songwriter and singer, and he had a bike accident about 9 years ago now, and now he's a paraplegic in a wheelchair, but he's amazing. So he just went up the shop and bought me a Coke Zero. So he's very independent, and he still does stuff for me as well. So it's really good. And I think, you know, and you look, and I would imagine it's the same with the other athlete, who you can look at adversity and see it as a bad thing. But, you know, a lot of great things come out of horrendous things, and sometimes it makes you stronger. And sometimes you realise, you know, you're not that bad off anyway, because you get to see a whole lot of other people who are so much worse off than you. And I just think he's pretty amazing. He's pretty strong. We don't actually, sort of like life is has always been like this, if you know what I mean. But it's, yeah, he's pretty amazing. And we have a great life. We do great stuff together.
And all this other amazing talent here in North Queensland. It really is, you know, these magnificent people. It's something that I genuinely get a kick out of shining a light on this dearth of talent, ability, adversity overcoming. It's so cool. But look, on that, mate, is there any message that you'd kind of like to give to people who are, so if there's a young softballer or indeed any other up and coming sports person, any particular message you'd like to kind of give to them?
Look, I actually think people who come from up north actually think they go through adversity by the fact that they live here and they don't get, you know, the quality coaching, and they don't get this and that. And you know what? That is so not true. I actually think when you're up here, and I often say this to the young softballers, you can work on a lower population of people with a coach here. You get 4 times the amount of training. It's more one-on-one. I actually think as long as you work hard and you really want something, and that's that hunger of wanting to be better and wanting to be the best is just has to be in your blood, really. I don't think there's a great adversity to being up here. I think, especially as a young kid, you know, I think some people move their kids down south, you know, and I often think there's some great coaches in different sports up here who are absolutely outstanding. And sometimes what's right in front of you is better than what you're going to get down there, because often you put in, say, in team sport, you put in a whole group of people and you get their train for 2 to 3 times the amount of time and get less work. So I just think there's a lot of advantages to being up here, especially in the early part of your career. Yeah.
That is a really cool perspective. And I've got to say, for me, that's very counterintuitive as well. And I didn't say this to Scooter specifically when I was interviewing him, but his story is amazing and inspirational. And one of the things that I know, because I used to be in the pool when he used to swim, I'd see kids coming up to him and going, oh, you know, he was coaching people. He didn't know it. He wasn't doing it officially. People weren't calling him a coach. But by the example that he gave, and that people would come up and go, and they'd ask him something, you go, you should do this, this, and this. Your stroke's a little bit out there. Try it this way. He's a coach. He doesn't know it. He hasn't got the title, but he's a coach. And that's where he's going. You know, I'm totally going to sit him down one day and say, mate, you're a coach. That's your calling. That's what you're supposed to be doing.